welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Steel Curtain Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of SteelCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is Steel Curtain contributor, Shayne Kubas. We've got a lot to talk about today, Shayne. And if you like rants from Steelers fans, stay with us because we've got a few of those for you as well. The Steelers lost 2 straight, this time against the Dallas Cowboys in such an unusual game because it started with a 90-minute weather delay, Shayne. So I saw a stat too. Dak became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw an interception on 2 different days in the same game. So obviously the game went all past midnight. And so there you have it. And everything ended horribly. Like it came down to that one last play, Shayne. Landon Roberts forced the fumble, made an awesome play at the line of scrimmage, the goal line stance there. And then Dak to Jalen Tolbert, just a perfect pass, perfect execution. And that's how the game ended. The Steelers lost by 3 points. We're seeing a trend here, Shayne, and I want to do some digging on this because I know the numbers can't be good, but when the Steelers allow 20 points, that game is essentially over. And this is the problem that we have. And Shayne, I talked to you just before the show started. I could do a whole 2 hours on a Mike Tomlin philosophy, and maybe we'll have to do that at some point because you can't expect in today's NFL. I know that scoring is historically low right now, but you can't expect to hold adequate or good opponents to 20 points or fewer per game. And when the Steelers don't do that, they tend to lose.
I think the problem with this game, and we're going to talk about it more specifically throughout the show, is, and we touched on this before the show too, Tommy, when this team isn't fully healthy, when the defense isn't able to just press the easy button with their pass rushers and say, go get a stop on 3rd down. When they can't do that, it doesn't work. The entire philosophy that Tomlin wants to win with completely breaks down as soon as that doesn't exist, right? We've seen it in the past when TJ's been injured. We've seen it now with Highsmith, and then Herbig goes down late in this game. When he can't ask his pass rushers, in this era at least of defense football for them, when he can't ask them to just go basically win the game on 3rd downs, everything else falls apart because he wants to play offense a certain way, but you can't play that way against teams that are even capable if your pass rushers aren't dominating the game. And they were for a big chunk of this game. But whenever ultimately it just came down to TJ being out there and they could target him and Herbig wasn't out there to help him, it all came crashing down. And the coverage isn't good enough. The secondary's not good enough, and all that compounded on itself throughout the game. We'll talk more about it, but like I said, maybe during the bye week we might have to really sit there and break down, like, especially if this continues to go the direction I think it's going, we're going to have to probably, like you said, put a whole show out there about why this is happening and the reason for it.
Yeah, and it's something that we've seen and we've been accustomed to in years past, Shayne. And I think the problem with spending this much money and this many resources on the defensive side of the football is all it takes is 1 weak link, 1 or 2. And that's what the Steelers had against Dallas. Beanie Bishop was not good. We're going to talk about this game. Dante Jackson had a few lapses in coverage where it looked like he thought their Steelers were playing zone. They were in man. And that's all it takes against a quarterback like Dak to pick you apart for 336 passing yards. And even with the takeaways, the Steelers got what they wanted, Shayne.
Yeah.
They had almost an even run to pass split, 28 passes to 26 rushing attempts. They had 3 takeaways and a blocked kick. And so you get all of these things. You're playing to a T Mike Tomlin's game plan. It's still not good enough because you have a few holes in your defense and your team is banged up. And so you see these factors come into play, and that's what ends up happening. Can you imagine this game had they not gotten the takeaways? I mean, maybe it could have been a blowout the other direction because they couldn't sustain drives. They couldn't keep the chains moving, which led to their defense, already thin defense, getting gassed. And so it would have been a recipe for disaster. It kind of was anyway. And the Steelers really, it's hard to argue that they deserved to win that game. They just didn't look like a good football team. A couple individual performances that stood out that were good, but the rest of the team it just wasn't there. So we're going to break that down in more detail in just a few minutes here. We're going to go offense, defense, special teams. Let's talk about Davante Adams though for a second, Shayne. This has been a big topic of discussion recently, and we just learned, and we'll talk about this in our Steelers Raiders preview, Davante Adams is not going to play this week with a hamstring injury. And if you're listening on the audio version, I'm using the air quotations there with a hamstring injury. People have joked on social media that Davante just doesn't want to be out there hurting himself before and sabotage his potential trade value before the deadline here, which is less than a month away now. And the Steelers, ironically, are one of those teams in play for Davante Adams. Some talked about, well, can they trade for Adams before the deadline? Raiders wouldn't do that at this point. I mean, if a trade went through at this point, I don't think Adams would be ready to suit up in a Steelers uniform anyway. But it's worth mentioning, Shayne, because we know the Steelers had a trade on the table for Brandon Ayuk. The 49ers pulled the rug out from under them when he decided to sign back with them. And then now it's no surprise to hear the buzz surrounding Adams. Jets were in play, a couple teams in play there. But the Jets have their own issues going on right now. Robert Saleh just got fired. The Saints were another team, Shayne, and now Derek Carr's dealing with an injury. So maybe the Steelers have a better chance than what they originally thought. Do you buy into the Davante Adams trade rumors? And what are the chances you think he gets dealt somewhere before the deadline?
I certainly buy into the trade rumors in general. I do think he will be on a different team before the deadline. Whether it's the Steelers or not, I feel like they would like to do that. I really think that they're in the race in terms of like they want to be in it. I just don't know how much they're in it, right? How much are they really going to be willing to give up? Because they clearly, even with the Ayuk situation, they did not press hard enough. They basically let it happen where Ayuk wasn't able to get a deal done with them and with the trade getting done because they weren't willing to push the envelope, right? And I'm not saying that they should have given up entirely too much, and I'm not saying that like necessarily that would have been the difference between us being 5-0 potentially and 3-2. I don't know. But they clearly weren't willing to push hard enough to get him. And I think other teams are going to be willing to push harder than them in these negotiations, right? Whether that means they're going to offer Davante more money in an extension, so maybe he wants to go there. And the Raiders are just trying to play that well. They're trying to get the most they can for him at the same time. It's unlikely the Steelers are going to be the team that offers the most, right? So it's going to have to come down to other factors here. Will he be on another team, though? I do think so. I still think the Jets make a ton of sense for him and for them, in the sense that he's going to a team where he doesn't have to really learn the playbook. He doesn't have to learn the quarterback, right? Saints, the Carr injury takes them out of the race, I think, because obviously that's going to mess with his ability to play with him for a while. It feels like to me it's either Jets or bust a little bit, with the possibility of a Steelers or a Ravens or a team like that jumping into the race just to try to bolster their receiving core where they can. So we'll see, but I'm not holding out any major hope that it's the Steelers.
Yeah, and John mentions here George Pickens complaining about. We're going to have a whole segment on George Pickens. So stay with us. Stay with us for that, and I'm going to share my thoughts. But I agree, Shayne, and I think that I don't think the Steelers are likely to make it happen, but they're certainly interested. I don't think there's any doubt there at all. The latest reports, though, do make it sound like the Raiders are not willing to take on any of his money and eat some of that money in 2025, 26. Huge cap numbers coming up these next 2 years. 35.5 million, I believe, and then 36.5 million the following year. Yeah. That is a lot to absorb for a guy that's going to be 33, 34 years old. Yeah. Is that something that they'd be willing to do? I don't know. You'd certainly have to bring the draft capital down if you're going to try to absorb that much and have him eat up that much of your cap space, and you'd have to figure out something else to do with contract and extension.
There would be an extension signed immediately. Whatever team
for sure
trades for him, there's going to be some reworking of that deal for sure. Whether, like you said, void years or an extension of like 2 years to even out the cap hits, whatever it will be. The cap, like people have talked about that part of it. That's not really in consideration for me. I think really for any team looking to add him, it's more about what contract do they want to give him when they grab him. And then also how, like you said, how much are they willing to give up to do that, right? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, Shayne, and the second round pick is an impossible ask. No, considering his contract details. Like if his contract was more reasonable, those next 2 years you're looking at like 20 million each. Second round pick is certainly on the table, but with those cap numbers the way that they are, and knowing that you're going to either have to absorb that, take it on, eat it in the future, whatever you do with that, the team that's taking this contract on, they're not getting a second round pick out of this. And now that you're more than a quarter of the way through the season, like that's just more time that you didn't have Adams on your team that you could have been, maybe in the Steelers case, maybe could have been winning football games. I mean, they lost these last two in games where the Colts, they nearly came back and mounted the game-winning drive. And then the Cowboys, maybe they would have been able to do a little bit more on offense to hold the Cowboys at bay there and win in week 5. And so, I mean, the Steelers really are several plays away from being an undefeated team right now. They're also, you can swing it the other way and say, you're probably a few games, you're a few plays away from not winning the game because you just don't score many points. I mean, 18.4 points per game on the season right now. It ranks 26th in the NFL. If you look down through all of their offensive stats, very concerning and honestly not that different from the levels we've seen with Matt Canada, though I will say Arthur Smith's offense looks entirely different and so much play action. I'm optimistic about some of the things about that. I know I'm on a different topic now, but the results overall haven't been much different. And so that's something that will need to be addressed as well. Shayne, let's talk about Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. This is a debate that's going to pop up this week. We knew it was going to pop up if the Steelers had a loss, no matter how it came. If it was another 24-27 type of loss, or in this case, a 20-17 loss, we knew this debate was going to come up because Wilson is working his way back from that calf injury. The Steelers just lost their second straight game. And so automatically you're going to look at the quarterback and say, is it time to move on? Is it time to make a switch? I've never been a fan of the idea of going back to Russell Wilson. I just think that in my mind, Shayne, if this team isn't here right now, the only hope that you can be to get there is to go with the 25-year-old guy instead of the guy that turns 36 next month, who missed the entire summer, all of training camp, essentially all the preseason, and played a handful of snaps with the starters in practice. That's my thoughts. And I don't think that Russell Wilson has been good the past 3 years either. So either Justin Fields figures it out and becomes the quarterback that you need him to be, or you're looking ahead to 2025 saying we need a quarterback for this football team. I don't see a lot of hope in going back to Russell Wilson. Shayne, I want to ask you, do you think that he could have won you the Dallas game or the Colts game if Wilson had been in the lineup and healthy?
No. I'll make this really simple. There's two ways you can think about the Fields-Wilson situation. You can look at it from a perspective of the fact that we've seen the offense play so conservatively. If you are someone who believes that the reason why that's happening, despite the offensive coordinator change, despite the personnel changes in offense, is solely because Tomlin does not trust Justin Fields to drop back and throw the football consistently on third downs, especially. If that's why you think that they're playing so poorly in those situations and why they're calling the game so conservatively, and the only way to change that would be to go to Wilson, then fine. You can throw Wilson in there, be more aggressive, try to actually get this offense to score points instead of trying to just hold the football as long as possible, then fine. I understand the reason for going to Wilson because the coaching staff clearly, for whatever reason, doesn't really seem super comfortable letting Fields play that way, even though every opportunity he's been given to do so has worked out much better than anyone would have expected going into the season, right? So the evidence is there to suggest that they should be asking him to do more, but they are refusing to do so most of the time, right, until they absolutely have to. If that's going to change by putting Wilson in, then at this point, for the sake of the season, sure. Throw Wilson in there, let him prove that he can't play anymore, right? And then if he can't play, then you go back to Fields, whatever. If you care about the future of this football team beyond the next 12 games, right, and maybe playoffs if we're lucky, right? If you care about the future of the team beyond that, there is absolutely zero reason to give the ball to Wilson. None. There's no justifiable reason to do so because he's not going to be the quarterback of this team beyond this year. And if he is, it's only because they're kicking the can down the road farther and trying to delay this decision about who the future of the team is going to be. At least with Fields, you give yourself the opportunity over a 17-game slate or more, hopefully, to see if he is justifiably the quarterback of the future. If he isn't, your position remains the same going into the offseason. You have to find a future quarterback. That's going to be the case no matter what happens, especially if Wilson plays over him. Why bother doing that for a team that is banged up, that no matter who's the quarterback of this team, at least of the options we have, probably isn't going to save us, right? If we're going to be saved, it's from the coaching staff figuring stuff out and changing their philosophy, which also probably isn't going to happen, but that's another talking point for another time. This whole conversation about these two, once Fields got the opportunity to play, there was no reason to continue to have this discussion for me.
Yeah, Shayne, I like the way that you outlined it there. I think the only way that would make sense in the minds of many fans is if you are 100% out on Justin Fields. Like,
Yes,
you
100%.
think between what you saw the first 3 seasons with the Bears and what you saw the first 5 games with the Steelers, if you're like, this just not a player that I want any part of for the future, then only then would it make sense to say, let's turn to the old banged up quarterback who hasn't also not been playing very well either his past several years. If that's not the case, and if there's a glimmer of hope left for Fields, you stick with Fields and see if he could be that guy. If he can turn it around again. Remember, he's really early into his Steelers career still. He's got a new offensive coordinator. Arthur Smith is new to the Steelers. The Steelers don't have a number 2 wide receiver. We're going to talk about the George Pickens problem here in just a second. There's a lot of factors. This shouldn't just fall on the shoulders of Justin Fields. Are there missed opportunities? Yes, there are. I when I went back and I watched the All-22 film, you can see instances where it's like, all right, you probably should have just opted for the shorter pass, the safer play there. I noticed on like one of the 4th down calls there, he had Darnell Washington open quickly. He could have taken that one. He waited a little bit too long, and then he went back to Connor Hayward, who got jacked up, dropped the ball. There were several instances where he could have made a different read for sure. You can nitpick about any quarterback, really. You can find these with anybody, but overall, it's hard to say that Fields is anything close to the biggest problem that this team has, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, because there are so many things that they need to work on, so many things that aren't working. And again, Shane, I want to bring it back to philosophy. I think some of it is a philosophy issue. When you've gotten leads in games, you take your foot off the gas pedal and you are content being ultra conservative with your game plan, which allows other teams to fight back in the game. It limits your scoring. It limits your yards per attempt. It limits everything when you do that. And we're seeing that with Fields. On the second or the drive to open the second quarter there, the Steelers marched down a 6-play drive and scored a touchdown. 5 of those plays were passing plays, and some of them came out of true pass sets. When you allow the opportunities to make plays will happen. I've always said, Shane, I think it's more important to, at the risk of potentially putting the ball in harm's way at times, it's worth it if you're going to get more points out of it in the end. Ask the Cowboys. The Cowboys put the ball in harm's way a lot. They came in with more points than the Steelers still. And that was with a bad game. And the Cowboys were decimated with injuries, missing a lot of their best players. And so when you're willing to be a little bit more aggressive, and the Steelers have to be, then you'll find out who Fields is. If you're not going to, you won't find out anything about him this year. And so that's the unfortunate part about this whole thing. Anything else you wanted to add to that, Shane?
No, again, just to me, the problem with Fields right now is, and we've gotten a couple comments about it too, they have to allow him to go out there and be the reason this offense works, not just be a part of it. The offense is simply not good enough right now for them to allow him to just be the conservative version of himself. That, granted, I like what I saw from him when they were asking him to do little, because it allowed him to slowly kind of progress. But what we saw in the Colts game, what we saw in the Chargers game, that's the quarterback that they need to win games, that the defense isn't perfect and that the pass blocking isn't ideal and the running game isn't working. Like, that's the version of him that they need to allow to take place if they want to win these games like this. And they're not doing it until it's too late. They're not taking the handcuffs off of him until it's necessary, not just at the start of the game. If we can get a touchdown lead, a 14-point lead in the first half of the game, even this battered version of our defense is probably going to be able to do enough to get the win at that point. But instead, we're trying to make the game a field goal game constantly. We're trying to just we just got to stay close till the end and we'll figure it out. That's not how you win football games in 2024. It just isn't. And until Tomlin looks himself in the mirror and realizes that, we're always going to be behind the 8 ball from any team we play, essentially.
Yep. And Wilson is expected to start practicing fully, and so this conversation is gonna amp back up again. You can expect probably some division among Steelers fans, those who are out on Fields, those who want to continue with Fields, and so be mindful of that moving forward. Here, it's going to be one that's not going to go away anytime soon. And, and as soon as Fields stumbles again, or the Steelers lose another game, it'll come right back. It's just an interesting situation overall. All right. It's the greatest time of the year again. Football is back and is here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. I love Underdog because it's easy and fast to get started and play. This is the added level of entertainment I've been looking for. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog, simple to use mobile app or underdogfantasy.com. Sign up with promo code STILLCURTAIN, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use in your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code STILLCURTAIN to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. It must be 18 plus, 21 plus Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus Alabama, Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or next step, or text next step to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369. All right, Shayne, and with that, let's talk more about the Steelers and Cowboys in our notes from week 5. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball. We talked about Justin Fields a little bit here. I want to talk about putting on the all-22 film and noting some of the things that we saw from that. The offensive line play, I think it was spotty at best. I mean, I think there were a couple nice instances of run block, but the run game's still not efficient. I think that it's probably a dual issue there. You're not getting the looks that you want. You don't have the running backs that offer the explosive plays. And so at the end of the day, you're getting the grinding forward, tough yardage, but you're not getting anything big at all. What do you want to talk about, Shayne, in terms of the offensive side? What are your notes from the offensive side of the ball from week 5?
The first thing that I noticed is that there's too many instances of there being a free runner in the run game and the pass game, where someone somewhere along the offensive line is either losing their block quickly or not IDing somebody coming off the edge as a blitzer or as a run blitzer specifically. And we could talk about the fact that Najee Harris is not the best running back for the system. I saw a comment about that earlier. I get that. However, the type of runner he is, we all know that for him to get into the open field and for him to be able to make something of the run, there has to be some amount of hole open for him to be able to gain speed through. And right now, the offensive line is simply not producing those holes. The difference when you watch the run blocking for him versus any other back on this team this year, for whatever reason, it feels like those holes are bigger. Right. And that immediately, 1, is a problem for him, but then 2, it's a problem for the offensive philosophy. You have this 220, 30-pound back, probably now, a little bit lighter than he used to be. And when he's gotten the chance to actually get ahead of steam, you can see there's a little bit more of that burst to him. But right now, the run blocking is not good enough to get him going. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I noticed, again, is that it felt like in the key moments, something was always off. The pass blocking didn't hold up. Someone didn't ID someone coming through, like I said. There's a couple third down moments where Fields probably would have had a chance to complete a pass had the pass blocking opened up holes a little bit more for him to see and run through, even if he had to get a first down, but they just weren't there. And then a couple of times the pass blocking did hold up, guess what? Nobody was open down the field. There wasn't very many moments where everything came together at the same time. The pass blocking held up. Fields kept his eyes down the field. Someone got open. I could count on one hand the amount of times I felt like that happened in this game. And that ultimately is the biggest problem with this team, where they can't do everything the way it's intended all at the same time more than a couple times a game.
Shayne, I think the most aggravating thing about this offensive performance was you were not playing to the weaknesses of your opponent. No Micah Parsons in this game. No DeMarcus Lawrence. Marshawn Nealon, their third edge rusher,
goes down
injured with a knee injury. And so Dallas didn't have a pass rush. Like, you could literally, if you wanted to at that point, just say, we're going to sit back here and true pass sets all day, and we're going to pick you apart. Deron Bland, the all-pro cornerback, not in this game. Kalen Carson, his replacement, also out. I mean, you got Trayvon Diggs and nobody.
Oruwariye, pretty much, and Jordan Lewis.
And that's Jordan Lewis is a solid football player, and Overshown's a good linebacker. But they have a few players on defense. Most of their guys are out. You did not play into the strengths of this team. Dallas got bigger on the defensive line with their injuries because they were forced to put some big guys out there, not even edge players, and you just run right to them anyway. And so, and Dallas did well against the run because now they're putting run stuffers on the field because it's the only guys they have left, Shayne. And yet Steelers were so persistent with running the football. They almost had that even 50-50 split like they want to thrive for, that you forgot where the weaknesses were of your opponent. Dallas didn't forget. Dallas knew to target Beanie Bishop. Dallas knew to look for holes in the coverage, and they were able to exploit that. The Steelers didn't try to do that. And so that's what's so frustrating about the game plan. In this, obviously, there's execution, and your personnel is just not there in some instances, like your wide receiver. And so, but seeing how frustrating the game plan was, knowing that, all right, this is our advantage to take advantage. We can sit back now and find guys open, even receivers who aren't very good. We can find them open eventually because the pass rush isn't going to get there. If I leave Darnell Washington in as extra offensive tackle, there's no way Dallas's edge rushers, Carl Lawson grabbing him off the street, is going to be able to come get there fast enough for us to not be able to make a play. And the fact that they didn't take advantage of that, very frustrating to me.
And I think that kind of tells you all you need to know, because the Steelers don't game plan for their opponents on defense. They game plan for what they want to do. And what they want to do is always the same, which is I want to run into the teeth of the defense. I want to control the clock. I want to throw the ball short and on time. And if that doesn't work, once we're down, finally we'll decide to throw the football down the field because then it's time to. That's their game plan going in every week. They don't want to change what they do based on the opponent. They want to do what they want to do and let the opponent dictate whether or not they're going to have to come off of that. And that is inherently the issue with this team from a philosophy standpoint. We keep harping on it. But you look across the league and you look at some of the best play callers, look at some of the best offenses. What they consistently do is they let their opponents not dictate what they want to do. They're going to attack them in ways that they know is best based on what they're doing, right? You look at what Matt LaFleur did with Malik Willis, a quarterback for the Packers. He knew that Willis isn't the most just experienced drop back pass in the world. He's not going to probably be able to run the offense the way that Jordan Love can. So what does he do? He asked him to throw the ball about 14 times on very specific concepts that he's probably gotten the chance to learn in a short time while being there. He runs the heck out of the football. He uses Willis as a runner, and they win the games that Jordan Love is out, weirdly enough, instead of the games where he's in. That's what good play callers do. And instead of doing that, Arthur Smith, whether it's him or whether it's Tomlin or both of them, it's definitely both of them, but whatever, are coming in every game with the same plan, no matter what it is, no matter what they're facing, no matter who they're facing. Until that changes, games against opponents that we should win, that are so depleted like we talked about, it doesn't matter how bad the other team is. It only matters how much we're willing to press them for being bad in those areas.
Yeah, I agree. And R. Barley chimes in here that game planning is not Smith. That's 100% Tomlin. I don't want to say the 100% or whatever, but I will bring it back to a philosophy issue. Yes, it is a Tomlin philosophy issue, I do believe. And so,
and there's a reason Arthur Smith is this team's offensive coordinator.
There's a reason, because Tomlin knew that he was the guy that he could get to execute his game plan. And so I do agree with that. The game plan, everything that the Steelers do, it revolves around what Mike Tomlin wants to do. The coordinators don't have as much say in that as what we would like them to have. And so I do agree that Tomlin plays a big hand in deciding what to do with that game plan, Shayne. But I think that you nailed it there. I don't think that the Cowboys were looking at this game plan saying, we have to get the ball to CD no matter what. They were looking at, all right, what can we exploit on this Pittsburgh defense? So, and they found it and they exploited it. And so that's what's frustrating, is to see all of the glaring weaknesses that Dallas had on this defense, and then do the only thing that Dallas could do, which actually Dallas's run defense is one game sample size, got better though, because they had to put so many big guys on the field and some guys that did very, very good job stopping the run, and you insisted on doing it anyway. So that was frustrating. Shayne, the other thing that I want to note on offense before we talk about the defense here is the snap counts of players. This was a really interesting discussion immediately after the game, because George Pickens was 5th among Steelers skill players in snaps, 5th. we're going to talk about the snap management thing in Tomlin's comments here in just a second. So I don't want to drive that home too big here, but the snap distribution was interesting to say the least.
I think from what I've seen some people break this down. I think Alex Kozora of Steelers Depot did a deep dive on this. The percentage of plays that he played within where he normally plays in terms of formations didn't really change, but they called less plays that he would normally be on the field, and I think that was for a reason. And we'll talk about that later. But him, I don't really care unless it is truly what we're going to talk about later, which is that he isn't trying hard enough and that he isn't playing up to their standard. If it's for any other reason than that, him being the 5th most snap player on offense, at least the skill position players, is truly just unforgivable. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about if that truly is unforgivable or not. But in terms of like looking at who the best players are, you cannot justify it.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Shayne, Justin Fields, 15 of 27, only 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4.9 yards an attempt, took 3 sacks. I can't put this all on him. When I go back and watch the All-22, you can watch the aerial view, every angle. Yes, there were some opportunities. But you know what? On those missed opportunities, Shayne, the Steelers still ended up converting those 2 4th down attempts anyway. The ones that I thought that Fields could have potentially thrown to somebody else. But overall, it's just guys aren't open.
No.
The game plan that you're calling really isn't the game plan that you should be calling against this defense. And so I don't blame him a lot. Having said that, probably his worst game so far this season, just because the efficiency wasn't there.
It's his worst game. But again, like if this is the worst game Justin Fields plays for you, then you should win the game still, probably against this team. That's what I think the biggest problem was, is like, and that's why I talked about with the Russell Wilson situation is, how much more is Russell Wilson going to give you than what Fields has given you through 5 weeks? Just if you give everything else, keep everything else the same, receivers stay the same, how open they get this the same, play calling stays the same. How much more would Wilson have given you in the passing game to justify playing him over Fields, who can give you so much more in the running game? To me, nothing. There's nothing that Wilson, he might have done less in the passing game, in my opinion. Because some of the plays that Fields has made in the passing game are ones Wilson simply can't make anymore. You look at some of the throws he's made to Pickens down the field. The big one against the Colts that threw across his body essentially down the field on the run, drops it in the bucket. Like, that's not going to happen from Wilson anymore. I'm sorry. It's not. He can't do that anymore. So to me, you're losing possibly stuff in the passing game by going to Wilson in terms of ability, at least. And you also drop off in the running game, which is the only positive part of the running offense through 5 weeks, is Justin Fields when he does get open space. It frustrates me because people always look at the quarterback when teams lose. When they win or lose, the first thing they look at is the quarterback. What did the quarterback do to win or lose? With the Steelers, especially with the way they play offense, you cannot do that. It does not matter so often how good or bad the quarterback is, because look at what we won the same amount of games percentage-wise as we did with Kenny Pickett, as we did with Ben his last year, as we did with whoever else. It's not about that at this point. It's not about how good or bad the quarterback is half the time. It's, yes, did they hit on the couple big plays they were given the opportunity to hit on? Sure, that matters ultimately. But outside of that, how much can we even put on the quarterback, good or bad, half the time with the way this offense plays?
Yeah, a lot of it is out of his control, I do think, Shayne. And you talked about, if you were to make that switch, you're taking away another element that you want to be a good running team.
Yes.
I'll tell you a way not to do it is take away a guy that offers you RPOs and running off of PA boots. If you're willing to do that, you're going to become a worse running team than you are right now, unless you are truly better just everywhere else on the field, and it keeps the defense at bay. But I kind of don't think that's going to be the case. No. Shayne, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball here. And I want to describe this as like a stud and dud performance. It truly was.
Yes, it was.
Like, I think that TJ Watt, Nick Herbig, fantastic. Cam Hayward, awesome still, because he's Cam and he's been amazing this year as a run defender. Watt and Herbig met at the quarterback a few times in this game. Yeah, sure, you could get more consistent pressure, but there's just not a lot of depth on this team. Guys didn't get much of a break. And then obviously Herbig got injured. Leal was out there. Leal got injured. Really, really thin. So we can definitely talk about the depth on defense. But I do think performance-wise, there were a few strong performances. Joey Porter had an excellent bounce back game after just a nightmarish performance against the Colts. He had the pick down the field. That was the best catch of the night for the Steelers.
It was.
Best catch of the night. Best catch of the night. Over the shoulder, deep down the field.
I think Joey's lack of ball skills was kind of too harped on during the draft process. I just think that he just doesn't get many chances to catch the football, you know? Teams oftentimes, like for him especially, you're either throwing to open space when he doesn't win in press, or you can't throw the ball at him because he won in press. It kind of feels like a lot of the time it's one of the two. So maybe that was harped on a little too much. But.
And when you do a lot of bump and run coverage, you are just not going to get the ball as much. Your chances of getting an interception go down as in terms of playing like off coverage, or so we can see everything in front of you and break down on the route. So yeah, Porter I think had a really good game. It's just the problem is, when you have a few weak links in the defense, like we talked about, and Dak identified them, Beanie Bishop had a nightmarish performance, and when it was even worse when you went back and watched it. I watched the broadcast version of the game on Monday morning, and then I watched the All 22 shortly thereafter, and he was just picked on. I bet if Dak wanted to, he could have thrown at him just about every time. He allowed 6 catches on 8 targets for 90 yards in this game, a pass rating of 115.5, Shayne. But get this, on the season so far, and I hate to be too hard on an undrafted rookie cornerback, but this is the state we're in right now. If you want to pay this much money to a defense and you have a hole like this, it's going to cost you. Beanie Bishop has allowed 16 of 23 catches for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season without an interception and with 2 penalties. And he's allowed a passer rating of 125.5. It is a player on defense you can just go after game in and game out, and other teams are not going to be oblivious of this moving forward.
And I hate to harp on him because he's an undrafted rookie corner, right? Like it's just not fair to really expect a lot from him. But that's the problem, is the Steelers put themselves in a position where they have to ask him to do everything at slot corner. And that's part, like, for a defense that's paid this much, right? And people continue to harp on that, and I get it. It's hard to be the most expensive defense in the league and not be disappointed by it at times, right? But for a position that has grown in importance year over year, for us to be this bad at it is inexcusable. It's great that Bishop was able to make the team and has earned a starting spot, but there's a reason why. It's not simply because he was so good that he had to be the slot corner, right? It's not like we cut a veteran that was in line to start and has had success and everything like that. He just was the only one. And that's the issue is, yes, is there a chance that you get something out of Sutton when he comes back? Hopefully, right? Maybe that'll be a thing. But until then, teams know, okay, yeah, if Beanie Bishop's in coverage, probably going to be able to win that. Probably going to be able to get a play here. And it's so hard to play defense when your pass rush isn't on the way that theirs has usually been, to not just get destroyed by that. Like, again, good offenses will say, okay, where's Beanie Bishop at? Let me look where he's at. Okay, let me try to line up my best player on him as often as I can. Let me avoid Joey Porter, because even when he's not played that well, like, he's always a threat to lock down the receiver. You know, I don't want to throw the ball down the field against Fitzpatrick and Elliott. You know, Elliott had a bit of a rough game, but I think some of that is on, like, I kind of think he kind of got pushed a little bit on that time of the one touchdown, and then the Tolbert play was just the best. Like, that was too good for anyone to really cover that much better than he did. But again, Bishop is just a liability out there, and until that changes, I think it's going to be a problem against any offense that can actually consistently target him.
Yeah, and it was everything. It was man coverage. It was zone coverage. I mean, when guys would come across the formation and he was supposed to be following, just late there, can't sift through traffic well. I noticed a couple of those swing passes, just 10 yards of space that he's given the guy. Yeah. And quite frankly, he's playing exactly like you would expect an undrafted rookie free agent cornerback to play.
How are we supposed to like be upset about that? Like it,
and people probably wondered at the beginning of training camp, he's running with the first team? Is this because he's that good? No, it's because Josiah Scott and all the guys that they had there before were really that bad, and Bishop was kind of their only option. And so it's to the point now, Shayne, where it's like, really, if you want to salvage this defense and take away a glaring hole, is there somebody you can trade for, a veteran you can sign? There might be something you can do there that's better than what you have right now. it makes me wonder even too if Corey Trice had not gotten injured, it's like, all right, I don't care if you're 6'3", you're going to go out there,
I might
you're
be
going to cover the
better.
slot because you're at least a much better football player overall. And so we'll see what happens when he comes back. And if they decide to do anything else, because this is getting really bad. DeMonte Casey, can you play the slot better than Beanie Bishop? Like, you have to try something at this point, because I don't know if this is a guy that you can go on with. And I don't even think that he's necessarily all talented to the point where it's like, oh, we got to stick it out with him because he's going to develop into this guy. Like, no, I think there's a reason why. I mean, he's a 24-year-old undrafted cornerback to begin with. It's not like the upside is through this world. He played with 3 different teams in college. So it's not a guy that I'm going to lose sleep over if the Steelers decide to bench him, but you do need to find something to make that work. Dante Jackson's the other one I want to talk about real quick, Shane, because for a veteran, I know you're on a new team here, but you're 5 games in now. You had several blown lapses in coverage. Like, you just didn't know what was going on out there. The one resulted in a huge play down the left sideline. Another play, Shane, maybe the most incriminating play of the game. The Steelers had a chance to get Cowboys into a 4th and long situation, or 4th and medium situation on the final drive of the game. Dante Jackson, out of position, goes and tries to swipe at the ball with his left hand instead of making the tackle. And that would have, the tackle right there would have forced Dallas to pick up, I think, a 4th and 4, 4th and 5. If they don't pick that up, the game's over. It doesn't never has to get to a Landon Roberts needing to force a fumble on the goal line and all that. Like, if you have to make the tackle in that situation, boneheaded play by a veteran cornerback there, you can't mess up in that situation. So I thought that was one of the worst plays of the game by any Steelers player, because the down and distance, the position, the time left on the game clock, you have to make that tackle. And so I thought that Jackson played a pretty bad game overall.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and I said this about him, I said it about Queen. Queen had a better game this week, actually. You know, it wasn't as bad this week. Still not what I want, but better than he had been having.
Yeah.
Those two on defense, like those additions, a lot of people thought they were big additions. And Jackson has had a couple good games in this 5-game sample, but he's not a consistent player. He never really has been a consistent player. So there's going to be weeks where, he's able to kind of shadow the number 2 receiver and do pretty well, and he'll be okay as a tackler and whatever. And then there's going to be games like this where he makes specific bad mistakes that could end up costing you the game. And these 2 additions, to me, have been at absolute best a slight net negative on the team. And at worst, especially factoring in if you're Queen and him combined, they've been below average starters at their positions this year as a whole.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Shane. I think Dante Jackson's better than what they had in Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson,
right.
But low bar, real low bar. He's going to give you some splash, and maybe he'll end up with 6 interceptions by the end of the season. Maybe that can make up for some of his big plays allowed down the field. John chimes in and asks, would Rowe from last year work to replace Bishop? I think that ship has sailed. I don't think that's going to.
No, I'd rather throw KZ in there or something and let Edmonds play some third safety or something. Like it's not something you can fix like externally easily. Like it probably is going to have to be someone else on the team playing some of those snaps, but we'll see.
Shane, one thought that I had that's been brought up before, and I want to know what you think about this. Throw it right out the window if you're done with it. But what Minka's been taken out of the game. I mean, there's no deep passing game anymore. He has got 0 interceptions and 0 forced fumbles, 0 fumble recoveries in 17 games, which is a whole season sample now, dating back to last year. Could you play him in the slot? Could you make him your slot corner and play Edmonds and a combination of Edmonds and KZ at safety? Would he make a bigger impact there than what he's doing right now? Because quite frankly, even though he does threaten to take some stuff away, he's just kind of been out of the game. And Deshaun Elliott's been a way more impactful player because he's been playing closer to the line of scrimmage in today's quick passing game.
I would be willing to try it, but I do worry that as soon as we start doing that, teams will start to try to bomb us over the top.
They could.
So it's I think putting him in the slot in certain matchups could alleviate some of the problems that you have with Bishop, where like especially on like situations where it's 3rd and longer, like 7, 8 plus, where like teams might try to go down the field, but you're already playing for that anyway, regardless of who's playing where, so it's not as big of a concern. but you need to have somebody who can stay with somebody early and not let them get an easy 8 to 10 yards on third down. Those situations I could definitely see using him more as a true slot, depending on the matchup, obviously. But outside of that, it's really hard for me to put him there without worrying about teams targeting guys down the field then, because Elliott is a good player. He's not a true free safety. We know Edmonds isn't a true free safety. Even KZ, like, he will get lost in coverage at times. He's really more of a hitter back there than anything else at this point. I think it would just be about how you do it, and I don't trust this defensive staff to do that properly.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. I think it comes down to personnel there. I mean, Elliott and Edmonds are both better near the line of scrimmage type of guys. KZ can do it. Can he do it consistently enough? That's the question. But I mean, you're talking about a big glaring hole. It's really, really killed the Steelers as slot cornerback this year. I think you could argue that it's been, I mean, maybe outside of wide receiver 2, just the worst position on the team through 5 weeks. And so you got to fix it somehow. And the Steelers, whether that's signing somebody or finding somebody else who can do the job, you got to try to fix it. So we'll see what they do. Those are the notes that I had on defense. Shayne, is there anything else that you wanted to add here?
Not really. I mean, like I said, Queen actually was a little bit better this week, linebacker, but in linebackers in general weren't too bad. I just think that they kind of weren't asked to do a whole lot because Cowboys run game outside of a couple runs was not that great as we thought it wouldn't be. And they just kind of hammered the inside corner with Bishop being the slot corner. So,
all right, I think that's fair enough. Shayne, I don't really have anything to talk about on special teams. Do you?
Was fine to me. I think the special teams is the least of my concern right now. So.
I would agree with that. If you were a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers football and you'd like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support.
About to reach 1,000 subs, by the way, guys. So
yes, we are. Help us get there, please. If you like this content, if you've enjoyed listening to it, please tell your family and friends about it. Anybody that would enjoy it as well. We'd love to be able to get there and keep bringing you as much content, maybe in the future, even more shows per week. We'd love to be able to do that for you. All right, Shayne, let's get to our big discussion topic of the week. And boy,
let's do it. Let's do it.
The Steelers have a George Pickens problem.
They do.
They have one. There's no doubt that they do. It's just, what is the problem right now? So I want to backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about what happened overall in this game. You could see that Pickens was not very involved. And when he was involved, he wasn't really getting open. He finished the game with 3 catches for 26 yards on 7 targets. Really inefficient game. Complete non-factor, really, against Dallas. Every time he was targeted, pretty well covered, like just not a lot of separation there. You wonder why this is the case. You also notice when you're watching the game through the late hours of the night, it's like, where's number 14? I mean, I'm seeing a lot of Van Jefferson out here, seeing a lot of Calvin Austin, seeing some Scotty Miller. Where is number 14? And we come to find out George Pickens played 34 snaps for the Steelers. All right, we're like, why is this the case? Was he banged up? Did he deal with an injury? Are the Steelers just trying to not put him on the field in blocking situations? Like, what is the case going on here? So then we fast forward to Mike Tomlin's comments during his Tuesday press conference. And Tomlin chalked this up to snap management. Tomlin, in other words, basically kind of deferred and said, well, we want to paraphrasing here, of course, limit his workload. We know we're going to use this guy, the guys that we need later in the season. He's going to be valuable to us. We're kind of limiting him. I think we've done the same with Cam this year. And turned to find out, Shayne, that's just not true. When he added the Cam comments, I'm like, I want to go look at this. So Cam over the last 3 games, if I'm recalling this number, because I tweeted it out yesterday off the top of my head, he played 34 snaps in week 3, 48 in week 4, and 55 against the Cowboys. Cam Hayward snaps at 35 and a half years old are increasing exponentially each game. And this guy's body's taking a beat in every play in the trenches. And he plays like 40% more snaps than your 23-year-old wide receiver who, as far as we know, has 0 injuries and has almost no injury history, at least in the NFL.
Yeah.
Why is this happening, Shayne? Like this, you have to question Tom. And I wrote an article, if you want to read it this morning, went out at 8:00 this Wednesday morning here. Mike Tomlin's full of baloney. I'm sorry. I'm not buying his comments at all about snap management for maybe the springiest, youngest, freshest guy on your entire team. He does not need snap management.
Yeah, so specifically I'll start with his snap management comment, right? Because that's what we want to focus on right now. This is a classic example of Mike Tomlin not wanting to say what he actually thinks out loud, because if he did say what he thinks out loud, the team and Pickens would probably quit. Because you can't say, in my opinion, what he actually probably should say or would say behind closed doors. If asked this personally by someone he could be honest with. Quite simply, the snap management situation, like I talked about earlier, there's evidence to suggest that he didn't necessarily play less snaps than he normally would in like 11 personnel or formations he's typically on the field for. But they purposely, in my opinion, avoided putting him on the field more than they had to outside of those specific times, right? Despite the fact that the offense wasn't working very well, the passing game wasn't working well. Instead of going to 11 personnel and throwing the ball more, instead of asking Pickens to go out there and be the number one receiver and bail them out of this game, they actively chose not to do that for long stretches of the game. Instead, asking, I don't know, Connor Hayward and Van Jefferson to be the top offensive targets, right? Mm-hmm. There's a reason for this, and we're going to talk about it with our next topic, but I'll leave it off with this until we move on to our next point, that as much as the lack of snaps infuriates me from a design standpoint and a philosophy standpoint, watching the game back, I think he deserved to play even less.
I think that that's fair to say, and we'll talk about that too. I want to go back to the beginning of the season. Let's track Pickens' snaps. Week 1 against Atlanta, 47 snaps. Week 2, 51. Week 3, 50. Week 4, 60.
Yep.
And then against Dallas, 34 snaps. Only 20 snaps in the passing game. The prior week, Shayne, he played 39 passing snaps.
Yeah.
Literally got cut in half. There has to be more going on here. We're not stupid. I mean, sitting here at home, you can tell us whatever you want. Yeah. We know better than that. And you know how else we know better? We have access to the tape. I mean, we got the all 22 tape. And so when we put it on, and that brings us to our next point, did Pickens take plays off? The answer is a resounding yes. I don't think that you can watch the all 22 objectively and say, no, George Pickens did not take plays off. If you want to, I cut up every single snap of George Pickens. It's on my Twitter account at Tommy Jaggi. Just go do, and it's on my highlights there, so you can go take a look at that. You be the judge. This guy was running half speed. I mean, I know Calvin Austin's fast, but I mean, he's taking 2 steps to Pickens is 1. He's a small guy too, so maybe that's not the best example. Van Jefferson, Shayne, is running faster and better routes than George Pickens. And this is a guy that is Allen Robinson-esque. Like, Pickens looked like the slowest skill player on the field for the Steelers because you could tell that he wasn't trying. In blocking situations, Shayne, when he was out there for blocking snaps, which was only 14 for the entire game, season low out there for blocking snaps, he barely got off the line of scrimmage. I mean, I know that sometimes the play is designed to go away from you, but he's barely getting off the line of scrimmage. Like, I want to see some effort here, and I just was not seeing it. This was an issue. It's been an issue in the past. Like, you remember the Colts game last year, Shayne, when Pickens failed to block near the goal line. It resulted in Jaylen Warren getting stuffed when he should have been able to walk into the end zone for a score. That became a viral moment, and there were others as well last season. I really, really was hopeful. And I don't even want to say optimistic, because we've seen so much of Pickens dating back to stuff at Georgia, but I was hopeful that he had kind of turned a new leaf here, and that we would see a guy with less issues, maybe just a couple incidents all season long. We're at week 5, and we already saw him just completely give up on this team, Shayne.
So this is why I talked about with him playing 34 snaps somehow was too many, based on his effort level. Yeah. And I think it's really difficult because, to me, and there's a lot of people that I think agree with this, especially those who have watched him for the last couple of years, he is one of the most uniquely talented receivers in the NFL, in the sense that, yes, he's not very he's unorthodox in the way that he wins, but he does win, and usually explosively so. Big plays, plays at the sideline, incredible contested catches, the whole 9 yards. The problem is everything else in between, right? The effort level has always been a problem at times, but especially so in a game like this, where there was a play in particular, I know you're going to know what I'm talking about, where they dial up a play for him. You can tell that it's a crossing route that is meant to go to him down the field for a big play when they need one. And he's dogging it. He's not running full speed. He could easily have cleared the defender and given Fields an open lane to throw the ball to. And he acted like he didn't know what was going. Like it seemed like he didn't know what was going on. And that right there, that play in particular, when I watched it live, even I'm like, that's a play you have to make. Like it's a non-negotiable in the NFL to make that play as a receiver, because it was dialed up for him. It would have worked. It was there to have, and he simply didn't run hard enough to get the ball to where it needed to be. And as talented as he is, and we've seen this with Steelers receivers multiple times, and at some point you do have to wonder if it's an organizational failure to take these guys and not immediately hammer home, like, you want the football? Okay, you're going to go block every play that you're out there. You're going to run hard on all your routes. You're going to sell routes when the ball isn't coming to you. If that's not something he's willing to do, as hard as it's going to be for someone who is as much of a fan of him with the ball in his hands and what he's been able to do as a receiver, he has to go. It doesn't necessarily have to be this deadline. It doesn't necessarily have to be right away. But if this does not change, he is going to do more harm to your offense than good, especially when he's the only receiver who can actually make a play. So he knows, he's like, you got to go to me. Like, I have to get the football or else this offense doesn't work. That's only making it worse, I think. Like, having him as the true receiver one, I was hoping would help him grow. I think it's making him regress.
Shayne, I don't disagree with that. And then you talk about that crosser route. I know exactly which play you're talking about. I watched it many times. He was jogging that route. I mean, he had started off with a good bit of separation, and then Trayvon Diggs comes flying. Oh, you can see the difference in one running and one not. And Diggs nearly undercut that. And that's it. Thankfully, Justin Fields did throw it further out in front of him, hoping that Pickens would pick up the speed a little bit. Of course, he did not. So that's one that Diggs could have easily undercut. And that it would have been hard to even blame Fields for that when the play is designed to go to Pickens. And he chooses not to run his route. Like it's painful. It was so painful to watch that on the all 22 and just see one of the most talented players on the team who you should be able to run this offense through, not giving any effort whatsoever and really killing this team. Like, and Shayne, you're right. You're 100% right. If I would have seen if I would have known that Pickens was going to play like that before watching the all 22, like if I would have known that this is what he was going to give us, I would have had Scotty Miller out there for every single rep that Pickens would have played, or somebody else. I wouldn't have played him at all. I think the Steelers should bench him. I think that you should actually bench him a game to teach him a lesson. And if things don't get better from there, you're right. I think you're right. So that brings us to our next point. What should Steelers do with George Pickens? I want to go back further again, Shayne. There's a reason why this guy fell to the second round. He's a 6'3.25" wide receiver with freakish athletic, acrobatic catching traits, can do anything you want him to do along the sidelines. He can rise up over the top of anybody. If this guy would try and could improve his route running, he's Justin Jefferson. The problem is you're not getting that. You're getting a fraction of that player because he has games where he chooses not to show up. It's just incriminating evidence against him now at this point between what we saw last year. And quite frankly, I think it's the reason why the Steelers got out of Deontay Johnson as well, because we saw a lack of effort at times. Remember when the ball was on the ground, live fumble, and he's just standing there doing nothing last year? Like, that's it. Like, you are either a Pittsburgh Steeler or you're not. And if you are a Steeler, you're going to get down on the ground for that ball. It doesn't matter what you think your status is. Look, every team's going to deal with divas at the wide receiver position. It just comes with the nature of the position. But you can't deal with guys. You can deal with guys who want the ball and they complain on the sideline, like, I need to get the ball more. You can't deal with effort issues. Like, that will kill your entire game plan. It's going to kill your entire offense when you have that out there. And Shayne, that brings us to that question. What do they do with Pickens? I think he needs to be traded. I will say this, and I will take heat for it. I don't care. You don't either. I know you don't. But Shayne, I want to pat myself on the back here because before the 2018 offseason, I was very adamant the Steelers needed to trade Antonio Brown. I was very, very adamant. The laundry list of things were piling up against him. And I said, you need to get out of this player before he sabotages the team and while you can still get something for him. If the Steelers wait any longer than this, everybody is going to wake up and realize that this guy is not putting in the effort and he's going to sabotage what value he has left. Like it would be astonishing if you can get a Chase Claypool level trade for Pickens right now, even though Pickens is a vastly more talented player, just because teams were already out on him. There were multiple teams that had Pickens off their draft board. There's a reason why 10 wide receivers went over George Pickens in the 2022 NFL draft. He had character concerns because of the things that people saw at Georgia, and that has not gotten any better. In fact, he's added more to his resume here, Shayne, other factors that people can look at and say, hey, I'm not going to do that. I think the only way it makes sense for a receiving team would be a contender, one like perhaps the Kansas City Chiefs. There's like, we've got no wide receivers. Like we could use anybody that we can get out here that can help us win football games so that we can save a Super Bowl type season. For a team like that, maybe it would make sense. For the Steelers, I don't think it does. And I this is not the type of player you can have. Having said that, Shayne, and then I'll let you talk because I know I'm rambling on here.
You're good.
Having said that, the Steelers offense will be disastrous if they don't have George Pickens. But what choice do you have? Like, you can't allow this to continue. And Minka's made comments in the past about guys giving effort before. Other guys have made comments in the locker room.
Pat just made one Freiermuth this past game.
Yes, Freiermuth did as well. You're right.
Yeah.
And so you can't have those guys who are selling their bodies out for this team and other guys who are not trying. It's just not a mixture in the locker room. You're all in or you're all out. And the Steelers, I think at this point, you're in year 3. I think you need to be out on Pickens. I think they've spent enough time with him.
So I don't disagree with any of that. I think this is the order of things that have to happen to me. The first thing that has to happen, and this is something that should have already happened, that probably has happened, that I assume will need to happen again if it has. Tomlin, the coaching staff, the leaders of the locker room have to bring Pickens into a room, and they have to ask him straight up, what exactly is it do you want to be as a football player? What do you want from yourself? What do you want from this receiving room? What do you want from this team? Because you are the wide receiver one. You are the ultimate weapon for this football team. You're the unquestioned leader of the receiving group in terms of talent. You're playing in an offense that, yes, is outdated a little bit and isn't getting the ball to you as often as maybe other receiver ones are getting, but it's because of where we're at as an offense, partially. What more could you possibly want to put effort out there on the football field? Are you not willing to put yourself on the line every play? Are you not willing to go hard every play? Because if you're telling us straight up that there is nothing that we can do to make you show effort, then you're benched for this game, and we're going to find you another team. That's what that's what has to have. That's the conversation they have to have with him, like face to face, man to man. And if he isn't willing to change that, if he isn't willing to show more effort and do the things that are required of him to be a receiver one in this league, then, like you said, it's over. There's no other conversation. I do not care how talented you are. I don't care if the offense won't work without you. It doesn't matter anymore at that point, because we're not going anywhere with you the past 2 games, partly because you're not putting the effort in to help us win games. The Colts game, you fumble because you don't hold the ball and you're not being careful with the football in a critical situation. Still, you have receiving yards, you help us out a lot, whatever. Mistakes happen. But what you can't do is make mistakes and then the next week just basically don't be out there and do anything. You can't do both of those things. A player can make a ton of mistakes as long as they continue to try to work through them and they're playing hard. I will always go to bat for that player. I won't go to bat for a player that makes those mistakes and then essentially takes his ball and goes home. Like, that's basically what Pickens did on a lot of his plays that was out there this past week, and it cost them the game probably.
Yeah, I think it's very immature, and unfortunately, Tomlin says he's matured. We're not seeing the fruits of that. We got to see it.
I'd want to see it at some point, Tom. Mike.
And Shayne, over the course of like a 3.5-hour game, George Pickens ran 20 routes. I haven't played football in a while competitively. I could go out there and do that right now, and I could probably run him harder than he did.
It's just
20 routes over the course of 3.5 hours. And so if you're not able to do that at full speed, when you're a 23-year-old in the prime of your career and just healthy, there's no excuse. I mean, you can see why teammates would get irritated with him. And so it is incredibly frustrating. The problem is, Shayne, that is the final nail in the coffin for your 2024 season. You trade George Pickens and you don't get something back, you will not be able to pass the football this year. Even if guys are trying hard, you can try hard. You still got a lot of bad football players.
You would need to find you need to find a capable receiver somewhere across the league to add to this unit. If you do that, maybe the Raiders, because the Raiders love talented players.
There you go.
Maybe they would do that.
Yankee swap. Can we say we'll take on Davante Adams, 32-year-old Davante Adams, and his big butt contract over the next couple of years here. You take on George Pickens, a young guy, see what you can get out of him. I mean, it didn't work well in the past when they traded for Antonio Brown.
Yeah, this is a little different, but still.
Different management. Yeah. So maybe they'd be willing to go for something. Like if Adams is dead set that he's not going to play another game for them, maybe they'd rather have Pickens than a third round pick. You get receiver back and try to save the season. So I do think you have to do something. And I know that we're going to be ahead of everybody else on this screen, and we're going to catch some flack for even putting this comment out there. I think a lot of the issue, Shayne, just media in general, is I think guys are just too afraid to share some of their opinions they have. It's just an opinion. You don't agree with it, you don't have to. Yeah. But I think that we've seen trends in the past with wide receivers, and
specifically this team.
And what Pickens has done, it's to me, is way more egregious than anything Chase Claypool did. Claypool just wasn't as good of a football player. It's just
and he did some goofy stuff on the field that made people it made it hard to root for him. That's really what it came down to.
Yeah, and I 100%. But Pickens is like, if you giving up on your team, there's nothing worse on the football field that you can do than that. And I think that and especially, Shayne, if you look forward, say Pickens is going into a contract year next year. The guy has got, I'm doing math in my head, 9 games left, 10 games. How many games left?
11 games left. 11 games left. Yeah, 12 games.
Math was not my thing.
Yeah, we got 11 games now. So
11 games left. And in the next 11 games, you're going to go into an offseason where you're going to have to pay George Pickens $30 million a year. And if you don't do that,
if he's good, yeah, exactly.
If he's good, and if you don't do that, you're missing out on the opportunity to get out of this and get something back in return. If you're fine with not getting it, if you're fine with waiting it out the rest of the year and not getting anything back in return, that's one thing. Okay, good, go for it. If you want to see what it's going to look like the rest of the year, I am afraid it's going to cause more divisiveness in the locker room if you continue on with this, because you're in the 3rd year of it and Tomlin has not nipped it in the bud yet. And it's probably not ever going to happen because it's just who George Pickens is. You go back to the guy in high school and college. It's just who he is. It's why he rubbed people the wrong way. And so I do think that there is a serious issue here. And if I can swap him essentially for another receiver or take the draft capital I can get from him and put it back into investing into another receiver like Adams, I would do that, Shayne, for the betterment of the team.
Yeah, again, like if you have an opportunity to get something truly like helpful in return for him at this point, again, I don't want this to be the case. I think part of the problem why some guys don't say stuff like this is because they sound like they're like hating on the player specifically, or that they like want them to fail. I do not want George Pickens to fail. I want him to be one of the best receivers in the league, because I know he can be that. He's done it for us. He's played like that for us specifically. It's not even a question of like, oh, well, he's shown like no, he has been one of the best players at the position over the past 2 years, statistically and in terms of like what he's able to do physically. He just simply doesn't have the mentality right now to be a great player in this league consistently. And until that changes, that's going to continue to be a problem for this team. And I just don't see it changing in this environment as it's been, because he's been in it for 2.5 years now. Like what's going to change in the next 3 months?
Yeah.
That's going to make him suddenly like super valuable to the team and make him, one of the best players in the sport that he can be if it hasn't happened already. Like something about him from a mentality standpoint is missing. And it seems like, maybe he can get it somewhere else. He's not getting that here.
Yeah, Shayne, and you're 40 games into this thing, counting the playoffs with George Pickens right now. If 40 games is not a big enough sample size to say, yeah, you are either all in with this team or you're not, then I don't know what is. And so I agree with you. If any of you listening right now, if you've got a different thought on the matter, please drop that in the comment section. We'd love to hear what you have to say about this topic as well. We're going to move on and talk about the Steelers versus Raiders Week 6 preview here. This will be the last segment of our show. The Steelers lost 2 straight. Can't afford to go 3-3. Certainly not during this stretch of the schedule. Now, I know if you just look on paper, the end of the season schedule is not as hard as we once thought it was going to be. I mean, the Browns sitting at 1-4, Bengals sitting at 1-4. Bengals are harder than they looked. They're better than their record suggests. I know
they just can't play situational offense or defense. They just can't.
No, but here's the thing, Shayne. When the Steelers match up against the Bengals, the Steelers won't be able to score points no matter how bad their defense looks.
Exactly.
But Joe Burrow will be able to anyway. So don't count those ones as wins. No. Browns, they're terrible. Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, maybe.
They're terrible. But that second half of the schedule is still hard because you have all of your divisional games, plus the Eagles on the road, plus the Chiefs on Christmas Day,
who are bad and win anyway. So who cares about that?
That's the thing; they just keep winning, and I doubt that's going to change going against the Steelers. So you realistically, that the stretch of this schedule the Steelers had to capitalize on the most was a stretch right now that they're not, and you had to take advantage of a beat up Cowboys team. You had to beat a Colts team on the road. Like these are the type of the games that you have to win to give yourself a chance. Now sitting at I think most people probably would have said sitting at 3-2 entering week 6. That's fine. Maybe they would have signed up for that, just knowing like that it could have been worse than that. You are still tied for first place in the division, even though Baltimore technically owns the lead because they have one divisional win now, beating the Bengals 41-38 on Sunday. But things could have been much better. You could have been sitting in a lot better spot right now and giving yourself a little bit more leeway. Now you can't drop a third straight game. Like at no point can you have a 3-game losing streak with how tough this schedule is. And now that the Ravens are starting to heat back up again, you have to take care of business. Steelers are banged up. The Raiders are too. We're going to talk about injuries here just in a second, Shayne. But the game line opens with Steelers 3-point favorites in Las Vegas this week, traveling out west for this road game in week 6. Is that a line that you're okay with? Do you think this will be the 3 straight weeks the Steelers will be favored and not necessarily 1, maybe even more? I can't remember the other games before that, but at least 3.
I think this line is unfair to the Raiders. I think that it should be an even point spread at best. I really believe that. Like, I understand the Raiders are bad, but that doesn't matter when you play the Steelers. You could be good, bad, middle of the pack. It simply doesn't matter. The way that the Steelers play, you always have a chance in that game. Like, no matter what team we play, they're going to have a chance to win against us because of the nature of our game plan. You factor in the defensive injuries. I know this Raiders team isn't flush with talent offensively, but they have a couple guys, and the quarterback play isn't going to be good, but don't know how much that matters either if you can't get to the quarterback, most likely, right? Any quarterback in this league that's worth anything can put up a decent game when they aren't getting pressured, realistically. And there's a good chance that we won't be able to get the pressure we normally get because of the injuries at edge rusher. So I think that this line is kind of giving the Steelers too much credit at this point.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that considering what we've seen in recent weeks, that's understandable. And the Raiders did beat the Ravens this year too. So, and their offense, although it hasn't been great, has shown more signs of life than what the Steelers have. So, Shayne, what's so interesting, if you kind of look at the Steelers Raiders history here, this will be 4 years in a row the Steelers have played the Raiders, and this is not a divisional opponent.
Yeah, we don't. Like, this doesn't happen.
AFC. Yeah, but because the Steelers always plateau and it goes by finishing standings there, it tells you where they've been finishing, right on par with where the Raiders have. It's why you keep playing them every year. So I'd like to get out of that rut and not have to play the Raiders in 2025, preferably, because that means you probably didn't do very well again this season. So the Steelers won their last 2 games. The last one was 23-18 in Las Vegas. That was just last year. Before that, it was that ice cold game on Christmas Eve. The Steelers won a 13-10 game. But then before that, Shayne, the Steelers were very poor against the Raiders. And overall, Mike Tomlin, in Mike Tomlin's career, he's 4-5 against this football team. And so this is not one that they typically do well with, and they've struggled traveling in games out west in the past. Now, they beat the Broncos out west already this season. But this is one that I feel like a lot of people would call it a trap game. I don't know if you can trap a team that's not playing all that well to begin with.
At this point, every game's a trap game for the Steelers, so it doesn't really matter.
That's right. So let's talk about some of the injuries in this one, Shayne. Huge injuries on both sides of the ball. The biggest for the Steelers, clearly, I think, has to be Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and DeMarvin Leal out. So
the entire edge room except for
your whole it's TJ Watt against the world is what it is, and it's going to look like that on Sunday too. You watch the attention that they're going to bring over to TJ Watt. So we'll talk about the matchups here, but those ones are huge. Also, no Jalen Warren and Cordero Patterson. Patterson's been ruled out by Mike Tomlin, I believe, and Jalen Warren was ruled as doubtful, so essentially out. So, and I wouldn't chance him back probably for this game anyway. You're missing a lot of guys. You go look at the Raiders side of things, though. They're not missing as many football players, but they're missing some really important guys. Just yesterday, Ian Rappaport reported that Christian Wilkins, one of the best interior defenders in the NFL, is ruled out in this game. Davante Adams is going to miss the game with that hamstring injury again, Shayne. So the Raiders are already without two of their four best players on the team. We just saw today that Michael Mayer is going to miss the game for personal matters. So they're down to Brock Bowers, really good tight end. So you still got to account for him. But you got Bowers, you got Max Crosby you got to account for. And then just kind of like a bunch of like, I don't want to undersell this team, but just like not a lot of talented football players across the board after that.
I like Jacoby Myers a lot, a receiver. I will give him
Myers
credit.
is good. Myers is an underrated player for
Trey
sure.
Tucker has had some big moments this year. I'm impressed with him. But yeah, there's a lot of just guys out there for the Raiders. And the problem is, again, I just don't know if it matters because against the Steelers defense missing the guys they're missing, Brock Bowers could easily go for 120 yards and a touchdown as a rookie tight end. Jacoby Myers could eat in the slot over and over and over and over again if they want him to. And I just don't know, like offensively, and the quarterback play has to at least be okay, right? Like they have to get better play than they got last week and the week before that. Like it has to be a little bit better. But as long as the quarterbacks are throwing accurate footballs, I really think this offense is going to do plenty fine against the Steelers. It's going to come down to our offense being able to probably score 24 points. And if we know anything about this offense, that might as well be trying to do literally try to hold the world up by yourself, basically, at this point. So I think you kind of get where I'm going with this already, but we'll
Shayne, and the issue is I feel like sometimes the only time they can score that many points is if they do get down in a football game. And
they have to
say, well, we have to score now. And yes, some of it is the defensive game plan changes and like we kind of saw in the Colts game, but boy, it's a struggle. That 20-point barrier, boy, that's been a struggle these past several years now for the Steelers. And I'm not sure if that's about to change right now. We'll talk about those predictions in just a second. Let's talk about matchups though. First, Christian Wilkins is not one we're going to have to worry about with Steelers interior offensive line at this point. But I think if we look offensively, Shayne, I want to talk about Brock Bowers and just the sensation that he's been so far early in his career. Obviously you knew him very well from his college days. And I'm a big Brock Bowers fan. Like this was the best tight end I've ever graded before because of what he can do after the catch. He turns into a mixture of a running back and receiver after that with how dynamic he is of a football player. This is a player you have to account for in knowing the lapses in coverage and inability of the Steelers linebackers in coverage at times. I don't want to see him getting matched up against Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts and guys out in space because he's just going to make him look silly.
Yeah, this is nightmare fuel for me. Like this type of player against the Steelers defense, he is going to get lost on a crosser 4 times in this game and go for 20 yards. He's going to probably get up to see him a couple of times on a linebacker, and they're going to get dusted because they're not in position. It's good. Like if he doesn't have more than 80 yards receiving this game, I will be absolutely shocked by that. Like I legitimately, that's where, again, this is a rookie tight end, as great as a rookie tight end as he is. This is a rookie tight end. And I am very confident that he's going to wreck the Steelers defense multiple times in this game because this is the type of player that they struggle against. Someone who theoretically should be someone you can deal with because he's a rookie and you're still trying to figure things out. But he is just so physically gifted and he's a smart football player. They're going to lose him a couple times in coverage, or they're going to get him matched up on a Bishop or a Patrick Queen, and it's just going to be a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the big threat that you have to worry about in terms of your defense against the Raiders offense this week. I think we could have said, obviously, Davante Adams, had he been playing in this game.
Yes,
now,
course.
Myers can still beat you with post routes and down the field. Trey Tucker, like you said, has been having a good season so far
Yes.
as well, but I'm not nearly as threatened by those players as I am about the potential
No,
of
of course
Bowers
not.
sneaking out, getting a crosser, and then just taking it another 20 yards after that. So he can
Yeah.
definitely hit you with a few big plays for sure. Maybe the biggest player overall that you have to game plan, though, for is Max Crosby going up against Broderick Jones this week. And I saw we had a comment by John here about Broderick Jones, just looks lost. He does. I watched Broderick. I went and watched all of his snaps from the all 22. I watched all of his pass snaps. I watched all of his rush snaps. He can, if you could take out the 10% of his snaps and just take the 90% of good, you can convince yourself that this could be a good football player. The problem is, boy, on some of those snaps, he does look lost. He just looks so lost, like he doesn't know which angle to block from. He lets his block get disengaged so easily. Like he has not developed the way that we thought he would at this point. In every single game this season, you can pick out like 5 to 8 like really ugly reps from him. It's why he's not grading out well, because of those ugly reps you get graded so poorly. And you can understand why, because if an offensive lineman is good 90% of the time, 10 bad percent of the time, you can't have that. You'd rather have one who is solid 100% of the time or 99% of the time. You can't have those bad blown plays. There were some against the run, there were some against the pass. Like it's just not been good for him so far. So Max Crosby is gonna be tough.
Yeah, this is also, as mentioned, Brock Bowers' nightmare fuel. This is even more nightmare fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Crosby is relentless. That's just similar to TJ. People have compared him to TJ a lot. They are relentless football players. So what that means is guys like Broderick Jones, who has trouble staying on his blocks, who has trouble picking up stunts and picking up like specific things where there's a rusher coming from a weird angle and he's trying to figure out how to block it. This is a nightmare for this type of player to go up against, because Crosby's not going to let up on any snaps. Run, pass, when he's out there, it's 110% every snap. There's going to be 6, 7, 8 times in this game where Crosby either gets free completely or he blows right past him or through him, and Fields is going to have to recognize that and be ready to deal with it. Because if he isn't, we're going to have multiple game-changing plays from Crosby by himself.
Yeah, don't underestimate Crosby. I know he's had a bit of a quiet season. Last year, he was, I thought, a true defensive player of the year candidate.
Yes, he was.
Like I thought he was a top 3 player in the league last year. Don't sleep on this guy because he is that good still. And now I think he's kind of on the mend again. Crosby is an absolute game wrecker, Shayne. And what I think the Steelers should probably do is say, where's big number 80? Because I'm going to line you up wherever Crosby is. And your job today is you are going to be our third offensive tackle, and you're going to make sure that he doesn't get to Justin Fields. Like I think it'd be worth keeping Darnell in as a pass protector every single pass rep if it meant that Crosby stays off your back. I think that's the one player from the Raiders defense that could wreck your game, especially now that Christian Wilkins is not playing.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend doing that. The Steelers will absolutely not do that, though, as we know. That's not going to be what they do. So, but that would be what I would do. You're right.
Yeah, but we just talked about how they game plan for the things they want to do. They're not concerned about
Max Crosby. That's just a nameless face out there. Let's just we're good. Yeah.
Let's hope at least, Shane. We can be hopeful that they'll draw some attention his way in the game. Other matchups, it's like it's Steelers. I do think that the Watt is a favorable matchup overall. He's just not going to, though, because they're going to send the tight end his way.
Watt against the world.
There's a reason why Watt's chip percentage is twice the rate of anybody else's. I haven't seen the updated stat over the past.
It's still got to be pretty high up there, I imagine.
PFF put out that chip percentage stat now, and it was after week 4, I want to say it was, Shayne, and it was 44%. The next highest guy on the list was 22%, I think. So way above the rest of the league there. I know he doesn't get the true double teams like going against 2 offensive linemen, but when you're chipped, it throws off your pass rush. And so if you're wise, Raiders, what you do is you take TJ Watt out of the football game. They should not be worried about Jeremiah Moon. They should not be worried. Shayne, Mike Tomlin said Isaiah Loudermilk is playing edge for the Steelers this week. How do you feel about that?
I've seen some really silly stuff on the football field. As a Steelers fan, as a fan of the sport in general, playing Isaiah Loudermilk more than 1 or 2 situational snaps aligned as an edge would be one of the sillier things I've ever seen a defense do. He has no get off. He does not have any explosiveness. He is not a particularly powerful or even that big ultimately player, especially when you factor in the length versus like actual like mass situation. And he hasn't been a good pass rusher from the interior. He hasn't been a good run defender from the interior. What do you think he's going to do for you? I would rather line up Cam out there at this point. Let someone else, like let Benton and Ogunjobi handle the inside. Let Cam go out. At least he's going to run through the tackle. You know what I mean? At least he's going to push the tackle back. Like, I don't think he's going to push the tackle back even as 300 pounds. I really don't. I think he's going to get stonewalled every play is out there. I really do. It's insane to me that they're actually going to do like his one rep he had. Now, granted, they were treating him like he was freaking TJ Watt for some reason on the one rep he had last week, but there's nothing there. I'm sorry. He shouldn't. I don't even think he should be on the football team personally. But that's a whole other question.
I do find it comical though. I really do when Tomlin says Tomlin was asked in his press conference, like, any chance because you're so thin at edge? I can't remember which reporter asked. Any chance you're going to roll Peyton Wilson out there? And essentially it was, no, are you kidding? I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to put Isaiah Loudermilk out there. So I'm a, but is there a worse player on the, I mean, among all linebackers, like off ball linebackers and interior defenders, if you had to put somebody out there, like that might be the worst option you have because he has no speed and no pass rush ability. So
yeah, I think that I think Terrell Edmonds would be a better edge rusher than Isaiah Loudermilk would be. I think like
fast off the edge. I mean, that's something.
I legitimately don't understand. Like, it's just a size thing, I guess. Where I'm just going to put a big guy out there for run defense. He's not a good run defender either, Mike. I'm sorry. That's not even going to. I don't even think he's going to be good at his run defense on the edge.
I put Montravius Adams out there. It's the only thing he's got is a burst. He can't defend the run. So you guys, I mean, I don't understand. Is it an issue if they don't know their personnel very well, or does it go back to his Wisconsin days where it's like, oh, I guess you were a base end at Wisconsin in their defense, so maybe you can play the edge for it's just so different. It's such a different position. Like, he shouldn't be playing there at all. So I don't. Anyway, it's just a curious decision at least. So yeah, expect some Jeremiah Moon out there, some Isaiah Loudermilk. They're going to bring a player or two up from the practice squad this week, and I just don't have any hope for those guys. You've probably never even heard the names before of the guys the Steelers have on the practice squad. So.
I like this from John. Iron Man Washington let him defensive rush. He'd have the length for it. He's definitely faster than
there you go.
Isaiah Loudermilk. So you know what?
Yeah, why not? Just bull rush right into the quarterback every time. So
at this point, why not? Game predictions. Ready to do that? I think everyone kind of knows where my prediction is going to be based on how this has gone. But
all right, Shane, I'll let you kick it off here.
Okay. I think that the Steelers lose 24-20. I think that the defense is not able to do much of anything because they simply don't have the personnel right now with injuries. I think the Raiders' offense is going to be able to be competent, get a couple touchdowns on some blown plays / big plays from the Bowers and Myers of the world. I think whether it's O'Connell or Minshew, I don't know if they've made that decision yet. I know that they were talking about that it hasn't been made, so we'll see. Whoever that is going to be able to do enough offensively, and the Steelers will wait until the fourth quarter to start to try to score points, and they will be a little bit too late to do so. That's where I'm at with it. I also think that if they lose this game, this is really early to say this. I do truly believe that with the schedule in the back half, even though it's not as hard as maybe we thought, I think if they lose another game before the bye week, they will not make the playoffs.
Okay. There's that bold take coming out. I like to see that. Shane, I want to give myself a small pat on the back for saying I had the Steelers losing by 3 to the Cowboys last week. I said 23-20, ended up being 2017.
Close.
I could kind of feel the way that game was going to go, and I knew that keeping Dak under the 20-point, and they wouldn't have been able to do that without all the takeaways.
No,
they had as many as they did. They in a block field goal, they still couldn't do it. So I never thought that they could keep Dak under that. And I thought that once you get to 20 points, the game's essentially over for Pittsburgh at that point. This week, though, Shane, I have the Steelers winning 19-17. So a bit of an odd score here, but I do think that the defense should be able to bounce back enough to keep a Davante Adams-less Raiders offense under the 20-point mark. And I think that that's just enough to get it done for Pittsburgh, even though they're going to be traveling to the West Coast this week. I don't feel confident about it, but I do feel like these 3 losses in a row is kind of a rare thing under Mike Tomlin. I think that they realize the importance of this game and how fired up they need to be hopefully George Pickens included during this game to come away with a victory. I've got the Steelers winning 19-17 here. Anything else you want to get to, Shayne, before we sign off?
No, I think we've done our fair share of ranting, and I know that you have to get going, so I think this is plenty long enough of a show for us to put out there for everybody.
All right. Thank you all for sticking with us. And like we said, we're really close to that 1,000 subscriber mark. Please help us get there by spreading the word. We normally do this show live every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We did have to move the show up today because of a schedule conflict, but we will be back to our normal spot, 1:30 p.m. next week. Also, check out Josh Yoris's show on Mondays live at 1:30 as well. He did a great job. Go back and look in the archives for that. Please leave us a comment if you like what we did today, if you have anything that you wanted to add. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.